Cleopatra is one of the most legendary figures in history. A queen, a strategist, a lover, and a symbol of power, her story has captivated the world for over 2,000 years. But who was she really? Was she just a seductress who used her beauty to manipulate powerful men? Or was she a brilliant leader who fought for the survival of her kingdom? Her name is synonymous with mystery, intelligence, and ambition. Yet the truth about her life is often overshadowed by myths and Hollywood portrayals. Imagine ruling one of the greatest civilizations of the ancient world at just 18 years old. Surrounded by betrayals, political intrigue, and a crumbling empire, Cleopatra did not just sit on the throne. She fought for it. She was the last pharaoh of Egypt, a woman who defied Rome and reshaped the course of history. But her journey to power was anything but easy. Her intelligence and political skill allowed her to navigate the treacherous waters of Egyptian and Roman politics, forging alliances that would define the fate of nations. Yet, despite her remarkable achievements, Cleopatra is often remembered for her romances with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. But was her love life her defining feature? Or was it just one of the many weapons she wielded in her battle for power? Her story is one of ambition, sacrifice, and resilience. It is a tale of a woman who refused to be a mere pawn in a world dominated by men. She was a queen who fought until the very end, leaving behind a legacy that still fascinates historians, scholars, and storytellers alike. In this video, we will uncover the real Cleopatra, the woman behind the myth. We will explore her rise to power, her strategic alliances, her legendary romance with Mark Antony, and the tragic end that marked the fall of her empire. By the time you finish this video, you will have a deeper understanding of one of the most powerful women in history. And if you enjoy learning about historical figures who changed the world, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Now let's begin. Cleopatra's legend has endured for over 2 millennia, often overshadowed by stories of her beauty and romances. But was it truly her appearance that granted her power, or was she one of the most intelligent and politically astute rulers in history? The image of Cleopatra as a seductress is largely a Roman invention, crafted by her enemies to diminish her influence and legacy. In reality, she was a multilingual scholar, a skilled diplomat, and a shrewd strategist who mastered the art of ruling in an era when Egypt was threatened by the might of Rome. Born in 69 BCE, Cleopatra VII Philopator was a member of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Macedonian Greek royal family that had ruled Egypt since the time of Alexander the Great. Unlike many of her predecessors, she fully embraced Egyptian culture, even learning the Egyptian language, a rare feat for a Ptolemaic ruler. This not only endeared her to the Egyptian people, but also demonstrated her keen understanding of power. She knew that ruling Egypt required more than just force. It required legitimacy, connection, and the ability to command respect. Her intelligence set her apart from the rulers of her time. She was well-versed in philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. She surrounded herself with some of the greatest minds of the era, engaging in deep intellectual discussions that reflected her understanding of the world. Ancient sources, including the writings of Plutarch, suggest that Cleopatra's charm was not rooted in physical beauty alone, but in her wit, eloquence, and magnetic personality. She had the rare ability to sway even the most powerful men, not with her looks, but with her intellect and persuasive speech. The Roman historian Cassius Dio described her as a woman who could bend others to her will with her words, an orator capable of making strong men falter. She spoke multiple languages, including Greek, Egyptian, Aramaic, and possibly even Latin, allowing her to communicate directly with various rulers and diplomats without interpreters. This ability gave her a distinct advantage over her adversaries, as she could negotiate and build relationships with foreign leaders in ways that few other rulers could. Yet, despite her intelligence and political prowess, her legacy was deliberately tainted by those who sought to erase her power. Roman propaganda, particularly under the rule of Augustus, painted her as a manipulative temptress who used her beauty to control men like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. This narrative reduced her to a mere lover rather than the capable leader she truly was. However, historical evidence suggests otherwise. Cleopatra was not a passive player in history. She actively shaped the course of events, using every tool at her disposal to maintain Egypt's sovereignty in the face of Roman expansion. As we explore her life, we must ask ourselves, Was Cleopatra's greatest weapon truly her beauty, or was it her mind? Her ability to command loyalty, navigate the complexities of power, and position herself as an equal among the greatest rulers of her time suggests that she was far more than the myths would have us believe. She was a queen who understood that survival in a world dominated by Rome required more than just looks. It required brilliance, strategy, and an unbreakable will. Cleopatra's rise to power was anything but smooth. Born into a dynasty riddled with betrayal, she had to fight for her throne from an early age. The Ptolemaic rulers were notorious for their internal conflicts, and family members often turned against one another in a ruthless struggle for control. Cleopatra's father, Ptolemy XII, was an unpopular ruler, known for his weak leadership and his willingness to submit to Rome. When he died in 51 BCE, Cleopatra, at just 18 years old, was thrust into a dangerous and volatile political landscape. According to Egyptian tradition, she was to rule alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, as co-monarchs. But this arrangement was more of a formality than a peaceful balance of power. The real struggle began almost immediately, as the young king was heavily influenced by his advisors, who sought to remove Cleopatra from power. She was forced into exile, fleeing to Syria while her brother's faction took control of Alexandria. Most rulers would have accepted defeat, but Cleopatra was not one to surrender so easily. Rather than relying on brute force alone, she sought a powerful ally, one that could tip the scales in her favor. That ally was none other than Julius Caesar. At the time, Rome was the most dominant force in the Mediterranean, and Caesar, fresh from his victory in the Roman Civil War, had arrived in Egypt to settle a dispute over debts owed to Rome. Cleopatra saw an opportunity and took one of the boldest risks of her life. In one of the most famous moments in history, she arranged to meet Caesar in secret. Legend has it that she had herself rolled inside a carpet and smuggled into his quarters, revealing herself in dramatic fashion before the Roman general. Whether this story is entirely true or not, one thing is certain: Cleopatra made an impression. She knew exactly how to capture Caesar's attention, not just with her presence, but with her intelligence and political insight. She convinced him that her rule was legitimate and that, with his support, she could restore order in Egypt. Caesar agreed to back her claim to the throne, leading to a civil war between Cleopatra's forces and those of her brother. The conflict culminated in the siege of Alexandria, where Ptolemy XIII was ultimately defeated and drowned in the Nile while attempting to escape. With her brother gone, Cleopatra secured her position as queen, though she was required to marry another younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, to maintain the illusion of co-rule. However, the true power rested in her hands. Cleopatra's strategic brilliance was evident in every move she made. She understood that Egypt's survival depended on its relationship with Rome, and her alliance with Caesar was more than just a political arrangement. It was a masterstroke in diplomacy. She accompanied him to Rome, strengthening their bond, and securing her position as Egypt's rightful ruler. Her presence in the city caused a sensation, with Roman society both fascinated and scandalized by the charismatic queen. But Cleopatra knew that power was fragile. When Caesar was assassinated in 44 BCE, she was once again faced with uncertainty. Without his protection, her position was at risk. Rather than retreat in fear, she adapted, proving once again that she was a ruler who understood how to navigate the treacherous waters of politics. Her next alliance would be with another of Rome's greatest men, Mark Antony. Cleopatra's relationship with Mark Antony is one of the most famous love stories in history. But was it truly about passion? Or was it a calculated political move? By the time she met Antony, she was already well aware that Egypt's survival depended on a strong alliance with Rome. After Julius Caesar's assassination in 44 BCE, Rome was thrown into chaos, with power struggles between Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, and Mark Antony, one of his most trusted generals. Cleopatra saw in Antony not just a romantic partner, but a crucial ally who could help secure her reign and protect Egypt's independence. Their first official meeting took place in 41 BCE in Tarsus, a city in modern-day Turkey. Antony, now one of the most powerful men in Rome, had summoned Cleopatra to explain her loyalty in the wake of Caesar's death. Cleopatra, however, was never one to simply answer to a man. She made a dramatic entrance. Arriving on a grand barge decorated with purple sails, She portrayed herself as Aphrodite, the goddess of love, while her servants dressed as Cupids rowed the vessel. Antony was immediately captivated, not just by her display, but by her intelligence and charm. She understood how to command attention, and this theatrical gesture set the tone for their relationship. But Cleopatra was not just trying to impress him. She was securing Egypt's future. Antony, in turn, needed her wealth and resources. Rome was engaged in numerous military campaigns, and Egypt's vast treasury was an invaluable asset. Their union was as much about strategy as it was about romance. Cleopatra provided him with financial support for his military ambitions, while Antony ensured that she retained control over Egypt and expanded her influence. Together, they formed a political and military alliance that posed a direct challenge to Rome's growing power under Octavian. Their relationship flourished, and they eventually had 3 children together. Unlike Caesar, who never publicly acknowledged Cleopatra as his partner, Antony fully embraced their union. He even granted her territories once controlled by Rome, further solidifying her position as a powerful ruler. However, this move enraged Octavian, who saw Antony's allegiance to Cleopatra as a betrayal of Rome. To the Roman Senate, Antony was no longer a Roman general. He was under the influence of an Egyptian queen. Propaganda painted Cleopatra as a dangerous seductress, a foreign queen manipulating Antony to destroy Rome from within. This narrative was carefully crafted by Octavian, who used it to justify war against them. The stakes were higher than ever before. Cleopatra was not just fighting for her relationship with Antony. She was fighting for the survival of her kingdom. Every decision she made, every risk she took, was aimed at securing her people's future in a world increasingly dominated by Rome. As their alliance deepened, the tension between Antony and Octavian reached a boiling point. The battle lines were drawn, and Rome was now on a direct collision course with Egypt. Cleopatra and Antony's relationship was not just a love story. It was the foundation of a war that would change the course of history. By 32 BCE, tensions between Mark Antony and Octavian had escalated beyond diplomacy, and war was inevitable. Rome was divided, with Antony and Cleopatra on one side and Octavian on the other. But this was not just a battle for military dominance. It was a battle of narratives. Octavian portrayed himself as Rome's rightful leader, while painting Antony as a traitor who had fallen under the control of an exotic and manipulative foreign queen. The Roman Senate formally declared war, not on Antony but on Cleopatra herself, making it clear that this was not just a Roman civil war. It was a war against Egypt. Cleopatra knew what was at stake. If Egypt fell, so would her dynasty. She and Antony gathered their forces and prepared for battle. Their ultimate showdown with Rome came in 31 BCE at the Battle of Actium, a decisive naval engagement off the western coast of Greece. Cleopatra, always a hands-on leader, commanded her own fleet alongside Antony. Their forces, however, were at a disadvantage. Octavian's navy, led by his brilliant general Agrippa, had superior tactics and supply lines. Antony and Cleopatra's ships were heavy, built for ramming, but Octavian's fleet was lighter and more maneuverable. As the battle raged, Cleopatra made a fateful decision. Seeing that their forces were being overwhelmed, she retreated with her fleet, sailing back toward Egypt. Antony, whether out of love, desperation, or a belief that they could regroup and fight another day, abandoned the battle to follow her. This move sealed their fate. Their forces, now leaderless, fell into chaos, and Octavian emerged victorious. The defeat at Actium was not just a military loss. It was a psychological one. Rome now saw Antony as weak, willing to abandon his men for the sake of Cleopatra. His reputation was shattered, and Octavian used this moment to solidify his grip on power. Cleopatra and Antony fled to Alexandria, knowing that Octavian would soon come for them. They still had a vast treasury and loyal supporters, but their options were dwindling. Antony attempted to rally his remaining forces, but defections weakened his army. Meanwhile, Cleopatra considered every possible strategy. She even tried negotiating with Octavian, hoping to preserve Egypt's independence. But Octavian had no interest in compromise. He wanted Egypt and he wanted Cleopatra removed from power. As Octavian's forces closed in, Antony, believing Cleopatra had already taken her own life, fell into despair. In a tragic misunderstanding, He stabbed himself with his own sword. Mortally wounded, he was brought to Cleopatra's chambers, where he died in her arms. With Antony gone, Cleopatra was now alone against the full force of Rome. Octavian entered Alexandria in triumph, claiming Egypt as his prize. Cleopatra, knowing that she would be paraded through Rome as a defeated queen, refused to be humiliated. She made one final irreversible decision, one that would cement her place in history forever. Podkumkar. O ChatGPTDs. With Antony dead and Octavian's forces occupying Alexandria, Cleopatra faced an impossible choice. Surrender and live under Roman rule as a humiliated prisoner or take control of her own fate. She knew what awaited her if she fell into Octavian's hands. He had paraded defeated rulers through the streets of Rome before, dragging them in chains as symbols of his triumph. Cleopatra, proud and fiercely independent, would not allow herself to be reduced to a mere spectacle for Rome's entertainment. Determined to die on her own terms, she began making careful preparations. According to historical accounts, she locked herself in her mausoleum, a grand tomb she had constructed in anticipation of death. Some sources suggest that she attempted to negotiate with Octavian, hoping to secure a future for her children. However, she quickly realized that he had no intention of allowing her to rule. Egypt had already been claimed by Rome, and Cleopatra was now nothing more than an obstacle. The circumstances of her death remain one of history's greatest mysteries. Ancient sources, particularly the Roman historian Plutarch, claim that Cleopatra took her own life using a venomous asp, a highly symbolic act that tied her fate to Egyptian mythology. The asp, or Egyptian cobra, was a sacred symbol of divine authority, often associated with the goddess Isis, whom Cleopatra had long identified with. By choosing this method, she was not just ending her life, she was making a statement. She was aligning herself with the gods, ensuring that she would be remembered as more than just a conquered queen. Other theories suggest that she may have used poison rather than a snake bite. Some historians believe she carried a hidden vial of a fast-acting toxin, which would have allowed her to die quickly and painlessly. Regardless of the method, what mattered was the message. Cleopatra would not be taken alive. When Octavian's men found her body, she was dressed in her royal garments, lying beside her two most trusted handmaidens, who had also chosen death over submission. It was a final act of defiance, a refusal to be reduced to a trophy of Rome's victory. Octavian, though victorious, understood the power of Cleopatra's legend. He allowed her to be buried alongside Antony, granting her a degree of respect in death that he had denied her in life. With Cleopatra's passing, Egypt ceased to be an independent kingdom. It became a Roman province, marking the official end of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Her children were either executed or taken to Rome, where they faded into obscurity. The world she had fought so hard to protect was no more. Yet, Cleopatra's story did not end with her death. Over the centuries, she has been reimagined in countless ways. As a seductress, a tragic heroine, a brilliant strategist, and a symbol of female power. Despite the efforts of her enemies to diminish her legacy, she remains one of the most enduring figures in history. Her intelligence, ambition, and resilience continue to captivate scholars and storytellers alike. She was more than a lover of powerful men. She was a ruler who defied the might of Rome, a woman who refused to be forgotten. Her legacy is one of defiance and determination. Cleopatra proved that a woman could command empires, challenge the greatest power of her time, and shape history through sheer force of will. Whether she is seen as a political mastermind, a tragic figure, or a queen who gambled everything for her kingdom, one fact remains indisputable. Cleopatra was a force unlike any the world had ever seen.